All right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in today. You are listening to the Adam Messer Show here on WRUU-LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. And this is the second hour of today's show. My special guest today is Stuart Jaffe, who is an author. And welcome back, Stuart.
Thank you.
Thank
Glad to
you.
be here for the second hour.
Oh yeah, I'm excited because like this the if y'all missed the first part, you need to go back and listen. Um, we were wrapping up that last part of the first hour. We were talking about you were a director, a theater director, and that you had learned how to do different roles and things like that to communicate. And we were talking about with an artistic directing of your vision, saying, "Hey, this is what I kind of envision of how it should look or whatever the character looks like," and then the artist takes that and they create it using their artistic abilities and vision based off of like your creative direction.
Right.
And so I would love to hear more about that with you, because I have commissioned artists to do work for me, and I've also been commissioned, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the same way. It's like if you understand how things work and you are able to communicate that, like you were saying, if you're able to communicate that better, and then you give that other person that artistic, say, hey, you know what? I would love to see what you're going to do with this.
Right. Well, the one thing you don't want to do is micromanage it.
Oh yeah.
If you're going to do that, then you might as well draw it yourself, because I say this. I've talked to artists. So many, especially I do a lot of up until the world locked down, I used to do a lot of conventions, and I look forward to doing them again. And at these conventions, there's usually art galleries, illustrators of different of different levels, and that's how I've met a lot of my cover artists. Is I meet them at these things because I can see their work and talk to them and negotiate at a good price and all that. But talking to them, I remember talking to this one guy. This was early on, long before self-publishing. I was just chatting with an artist at one point, and he would do like art for Magic the Gathering, for the cover, for the cards.
Yeah.
And art for the different Dragon magazines and things like that. And he'd say it would drive you crazy doing the card art, because if you had a good art director, it was wonderful. But if you didn't, and they try to micromanage it, they'd sit there and they'd say, okay, we need a horde of whatever goblins coming down this mountain, and on the back, or coming down this hill, and on the top of the hill is the leader. He's so far as, okay, I can do that. And then he's like, yeah, and the leader has to have this sword with a jeweled hilt and starts micromanaging this. And the guy, and he's like, you realize this is going to be like the size of half of my fingernail. Right. On this card. Nobody's going to see that. And no, it's got to be that way. And so you destroy, by not understanding the medium you're working in, and by trying to micromanage it, it just ruined what was being done. It took out the joy of the artist, which comes out in the art. Emotions come through our artwork. That's why people like to listen to music and look at paintings and read books. So it just makes no sense to try and tell an artist how to draw a picture.
I think it's like over seasoning a steak, or telling the chef, hey, I know that this is your signature dish and all, but right. Have you ever thought about putting ketchup on it for me?
Yeah.
And they're no, this is the signature dish.
Yeah. And it goes back to that. We were, to continue the whole food metaphor thing earlier, we were talking about, you'd say to the artist, I want Italian, I want some cheese, and you leave it to them, and what you'll get back is an Italian dish that hopefully, if you gave enough information but not too much, you got something far beyond your expectations, and and that's that's the way to do it as best you can.
I tell you what I love about that too is like when I did the anthology, we were talking about this last this last hour or whatever. I set the idea. I said this, it's called The Devil's Due, everybody, and not to plug it or anything like that, but I set the premise of a deal gone wrong with the devil of sorts. It doesn't have to be, a devil or a demon. It could have been, a person or whatever, just a devil of sorts. It's an age old story, right? I mean, there's been so many different takes on it. The premise was it had to be a deal gone wrong with the devil, no happy endings, and then no adult suggestive stuff, right? And I was really amazed with the stories that the authors sent back into me from just me setting those parameters, right?
Right.
I didn't say it has to have X, Y, Z. I didn't tell them. I wasn't trying to micromanage them. I didn't even want to read the first draft. I told them, I said, I want to hear a premise. I want to see, like your story pitch. But after that, I don't want to see it until you send me a polished product. I don't want to see the rough draft. I don't want to see, I want to see what you feel like is your best work to present, that you want to put it out there. And then, we went back and forth. Some of the people, like a person like yourself, you're very polished. You've been doing it for a while. You would need very minimal coaching, might be some stuff that I would say, hey, did you ever think about it like this? Some other people, they need a little bit more coaching. And even though that was my first project working as the chief publisher or whatever, because of my other experiences in writing and working with editors, professionally on different levels, I was able to take my experiences like that and work with those authors to make that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if I had said, hey, Stuart, I don't like this because you didn't put the gem on the hilt of the sword, you would be like, you're out of your mind, man. I mean, like you're talking about a 2 millimeter size picture here.
Right.
And that I feel like that is having that relationship with people. You have to have a good relationship, and then you also have to kind of have a thick skin because, I know, like I said before, we all kind of like to drink our own tea. I know that there's sometimes where I'm like, man, I think this is the best thing since sliced bread, but then it's not.
Oh, sure.
And sure. I need somebody to check me and say, hey, man,
Yeah, I'd say that's one of the I've had this conversation. My son is also he's just starting out. He's trying to follow in my footsteps and be a writer, and it's fascinating to watch because he's doing it now.
Yeah.
And so now is a whole different world than the one I came up through the ranks in. And last hour I told you my whole story, but we kind of glossed over the thing, which is that I spent 10 years writing short stories, and that's not unusual. Most authors, did start off doing short stories, and it was a great way to learn to write because you could try stuff and fail.
Mm-hmm.
And you only spent a week or two working on it, and then you try something else. And you, because of the nature of the business back then, there were, if you're trying to get into Asimov's magazine or magazine of fantasy and science fiction or Analog, those were the three big ones. They might publish 6 stories in an issue, and of those 6, 3 are already given to their marquee name authors who are going to be on the cut,
Yeah.
And then there's 2 more that are given to the up and coming authors who the editor is trying to groom into becoming somebody big. So basically all the other 1,000 submissions, of which you up one of, is going for one spot.
Right.
And so you get rejected over and over and over, and that builds up that thick skin you were talking about.
Yeah.
And the way it is today, you write a short story, you could just put it online. You write a novel, you can just put it online. And so there's no buffer between you and the audience. So you're going to learn the real hard way how quickly the audience will sit there and say, we don't like what you're doing. And
Yeah.
and actually,
Yeah.
that's the actual message is we don't like what you're doing, but the way most beginning authors hear it is we don't like you.
We don't like you. Yeah. Yeah.
And it takes. I had years of preparing myself to understand that that's not that they're just dealing with the work. It's not personal, and that not everybody's going to like it. I have 1-star reviews. I have everything 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
I got to do the station ID real quick, Stuart.
Sure.
Hold tight real quick. Everybody, you're tuning in today to the Adam Messer Show. I'm your host, Adam Messer, with my special guest, author Stuart Jaffe. And you're listening to us here on WRULP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. I also want to encourage you to go out to WRU.org and consider sponsoring us with a donation, because we are all community, we are all volunteer, and we are a not-for-profit radio station. And so we can't do this without you, the listener. Like for me, for example, I love, Stuart, you being here today with me, mm-hmm. I love to be able to do that, because I always love having a good conversation with folks. And then, like today, I feel like, you and I have never talked before in person, voice to voice or anything like that. We've been friends on Facebook. But I felt like the last hour and 15 minutes or so that we've been talking, I felt like I've gotten to know you a lot better. I've gotten to learn more about your story, and I feel like that's strengthened our friendship.
Mm-hmm.
Like before we were kind of like acquaintances, online friends. Now I'm starting to feel like, okay, well, yeah, we have a lot in common. We're actually starting to become friends.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the nice things I love about being able to connect with other creative people like yourself, because some people you click with, some people you don't. I mean, that's just the world. And it's like you said with the fans, there are going to be people that like your work, and there are going to be people that don't like your work. There are going to be people that like you, and there are going to be people that don't like you.
Right.
And you have to just have that, I have my wife and I have 3 kids. And one of the things that I've always tried to instill in them is there are going to be people out there who don't like you for whatever reason. And it's really not mm-hmm. your problem. You've just got to be professional and do your thing and keep going. Like when you get that 1-star review, oh man, it just hit me right in the heart. Yeah. Like, why did they think, I had a person that I admire and respect give a review of one of my stories, and said that they enjoyed the story. However, they felt like I was rambling.
Mm-hmm.
Now, same story. 2 other people said that, one said that I was masterful. I was like, what? And another person said it was a superb story. Folks that I don't know. Like I've met them online, but I don't know them. Right. And the one that was that they liked the story, but I was rambling, I took it like, oh my gosh.
Oh, well, yeah. There's an actual scientific phenomenon that I think there's a name for it, but there's a real thing in our brains where it takes, like, in terms of, we'll put it in terms of reviews, but it takes, I don't know, 10 good reviews to equal the
kind of
the equivalent of 1 negative review.
Yeah,
your brain
kind of bounce out.
Your brain just fixates on those things. And in fact, I often will tell beginning writers, not if, but when you get your first 1-star review, think of whoever you think is the greatest writer that you love the most, whatever, Stephen King, Neil Gaiman, you name it, whoever it is. Pick whatever you think your favorite book is. Go on Amazon and look at the thousands of 1-star reviews they have for that book.
And the trolls, internet trolls like to feed off of that negative.
Yeah. It's not. But even discounting the people who just like to be negative, the point is that you can't please everybody.
No.
And it's not your job to please everybody. Your job, this ties back into the business part. The publisher's job is to market your book to find the people who will like the book, not everybody.
Right.
My books are, if you like urban fantasy, if you like, mysteries with a little bit of supernatural stuff going on, you're gonna love my stuff. If you like the action, and
Right.
the John Wicky, you're gonna, there's a, I shouldn't say you'll love it, but there's a good chance. There's a chance you will certainly like the subject matter, and then if you like, clear, concise, direct to the point kind of language, then there's a good chance you're going to like my books. But if you prefer long, rambling sentences, if you prefer, more opaque, kind of navel-gazing kind of books, which there are a lot of people who like that stuff, then you're not going to like this.
What
So
talking
it's,
about
it's
that? It kind of struck me because I try to be concise. I don't try to like ramble on. Like that's
right.
like the antithesis of what I try to do, and it just made me think like, well, what was rambling on or whatever, and
Right.
you know,
So, yeah, no, I know exactly what you're saying, and there's, I can't speak directly to what your specific piece because I obviously haven't looked at it,
yeah.
but
I'm not asking that, but yeah,
in general terms, um, there there are a couple different things at play when somebody reads a book, and there's the literal words on the page, and there's their interpretation of those words, and then there's this more how their brain works and takes those interpretations and sees and feels things.
right.
And so you may have a sentence that's only a handful of words long, but depending on what those words are and in what order they are, it can feel very short and concise and clear.
Mm-hmm.
It could be concise but complicated, so that it causes them to slow down and have to think through what you're trying to say.
Oh my gosh. The
what I'm
8th
saying?
grade reading level that people in America,
Well,
that's what makes me think. Like I try to get rid of those types of words that are going to be like the dictionary stoppers, right?
Well, there's that, but there are other authors who use that stuff to their advantage too.
Yeah.
But it's more. But what I'm trying to say is that when you look at your own work and you see that the sentences, the word choices, everything is very clear, very concise, and yet it's coming off rambling. That's you're moving beyond the words into how they're feeling and
Right.
and into perhaps the rhythms of the sentences and there's a lot more than just short sentences or my sentences are not always short. They can be long. You can make a long rambling sentence that feels very short and concise. It's weird, but it can be done. And part of that is because as you get more knowledgeable of grammar, which is part of I know beginning writers hate to know this, but you should learn grammar, you should learn spelling, you should learn these things if you haven't already learned them. They're so essential. They're the building blocks of the tools you're going to use. And what we really do as writers is, I feel that my best writing, I think the best writing, is writing that makes the reader's brain do all the work. So if I'm going to describe a big battle, I don't describe every little thing about the battle.
Right.
I describe things that imply the battle, so your brain will go and put it all in.
Yeah, like we talked about using the imagination, like the person's imagination, because everybody's got a point of reference to something.
If you don't mind me taking a moment,
I've
got an example that
please. We got about 10 minutes before the next break, so go ahead.
Okay, so this is something I want to. I have taught writing and come into classrooms from everything from elementary school up to college for a day or two and come and talk about writing and all this. And I always give this example of how it's actually an example of how you can make a sentence do more than one thing at a time, but it also is how words can be used to make a reader see something beyond what you're just telling them. So here's I'm going to give you two examples. Guy walks into his apartment and steps on an old moldy pizza box. Cockroaches skitter around out of it as he throws his keys onto the floor and walks over to the mattress that's the stained mattress that's in the back corner. He flops down and wishes his television would work. He belches, yawns, and goes to sleep. Okay, so that's number one. Example number two. Gentleman walks into his apartment, puts his keys on the gold hook that's just at eye level, takes off his hat and sets it on the little round table next to a lamp. He walks in to his four-poster bed, sits down on the edge, and lightly brushes his clothes before picking up the remote to turn on his flat screen. Okay? So those are the two examples. Now, in neither example did I describe the person in any detail. I described the room and I described some of their actions. That's it.
Right.
And yet I have no doubt that everybody listening to this saw the same two people I wanted them to see, even though everybody saw two completely different people if they described them to each other. In other words, nobody saw the first guy as a uptight guy in a three-piece suit, perfectly shaved and trim and in good health.
Right, right.
And nobody saw the second guy as a slovenly, guy who's living on hamburgers and nothing else and hadn't shaved in a week, let alone bathed. Right?
I actually saw the same guy for both. In my imagination, I was thinking okay, there's a guy and, he's just two different scenarios,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's a
But
cool
you
point.
Understand. Yeah, so you can use words to describe one thing and have them describe a whole lot more,
Mm-hmm.
and when we do it that way, it engages the brain to come up with all these things, and this is why in a good book is always going to be better than the movie because your brain is supplying all the little details. So for some people who listen to that, the slovenly guy was unshaven. And the degree to which they were unshaven and what that looked like, it felt like they're seeing and hearing and feeling and thinking about all of that, even though I've not put any of that into words.
Mm-hmm. I think a great example of that between the book and the movie, or what people their expectations are of that. Do you know? You ever heard probably the Transformer toys or whatever?
Sure.
Okay, so I'm a big Transformer nerd. When I was a kid, it came out in '84. I was 8 years old or whatever, and when the early 2000s when they came out with the Transformer movies, the live action movies or whatever, there were a lot of people that complained that they were Bayformers, right? That they were these alien looking robots and whatever, and that they wanted these Transformers. They wanted the Transformer toys to look like the Transformer in this live action movie to look like, it did from this 80s cartoon, very animated, looking kind of thing. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, that just doesn't translate. It works for a cartoon because, you want those colors and you want the over exaggerated, animation or whatever, but it doesn't translate to a movie. Right. And I think out of all the books I've ever read and movies that I've ever seen, I feel like the Lord of the Rings was a very good interpretation of the book. But but there are a lot of people out there that they complain and something I feel like is important is that when going back to the artistic direction or whatever, that movie is not just a retelling of the book. It is that director's artistic version of the movie of the book, and then when you go back, when you're talking about the descriptions of the two guys or whatever, and the scenarios or whatever, everybody's going to have a different perception of that person with their imagination, so I like that you teach it that way, because I feel like that's a great way to break it down for folks.
It shows that how important the reader's imagination is. And once you understand that, then you can start using that to your advantage. So that if you've ever wondered, for example, how you can put something in the opening pages of a book or in the opening chapters and then not mention again the entire book, and then at the end you bring it out and they still people will be like, oh, that's why, and they still remember it. I used to be, as a writer, one of my early years, I used to be like, how did that writer do that? How did they make me remember this when it took me 2 weeks to read the book, and that part wasn't, it was 2 weeks ago that I read that. But this is part of these are part of the techniques. There are other things at play there, but it's making the reader's brain engage. And if I had those description of those two guys, if I had gone into depth about all their physical attributes and their clothes and all that, I could make everybody see the exact same thing, but you wouldn't care about them. But you care about this guy you created in your head.
I'll tell you what stuck out the most between those descriptions was the cockroach-filled pizza box. The moldy cockroach-filled pizza box. And I was thinking about Joe's apartment. You talked about MTV like earlier. Joe's apartment. Yep. I was thinking, first thing I thought of was Joe's apartment. And that's who I saw in my mind after you said pizza box. I was like, oh, here we go. It's like Joe's apartment.
That's actually a really good example, because I'm sure there are a lot of people listening who have no clue what you're referring to. I know exactly what you're referring to. But so that's something makes it very special and unique for you. And
like if you did a callback on that, I would be like, oh yeah, I remember that pizza box.
Right. And so you'll remember it a lot more. And then the opposite is true too, is that when you're writing, if you specify something, that makes it much more important. So if I had sat there and specified that both men were, I don't know, had a red hat, you would remember that they were a red hat, because I described nothing else about them, right? I described the room. But if I mention a red hat, and especially if I gave it 2 sentences, you're not going to forget that he had that red hat.
Yeah. I love that, because like any kind of storytelling, like when you were talking about that, writing something in the beginning and then you bring it back up in the end, to me, I love comedy, and the best jokes are, in my opinion, are like the anecdotal ones where they do a callback. They set the stage and they talk about something, and at the end of the joke, the punchline is that callback, right? Kind of like what you're talking about with the writing in the book, and you're like, boom, this is where this, we don't know why, he's got the red hat until the very end of it, and we're like, oh wow, it's got that element of surprise and that satisfaction of that fulfillment, and you're like, that's why he had a red hat. That eureka moment or whatever.
There's also at play, and this is really, we're getting into much higher level things here, but
let's do it. We got to take a break in a minute, but let's get into it. I love it.
When you get control over language, so that you can manipulate your reader, but so that you can get them thinking the way you want them to think about the things you want them to think about, they unconsciously feel more confident about you as a writer.
Right.
So if you can tell when you're reading a beginning author's work, even if you don't know they're a beginning author, you're just reading something, you will instinctively either trust that they know what they're doing, because you're going to come up with stuff and you're going to be like, what's this stuff with this red hat keep coming up? Right?
Yeah.
But if you trust the writer...
Hello?
That part of that comes from how well controlled the language is into making the reader's brain see things and feel things and do things. And beginning writers don't have those skills yet, so a lot of times you just feel confused because you don't know why they're saying things. Whereas a more advanced writer has unconsciously made you trust them.
That is a great breaking point. I love that, Stuart. Let's take the break real quick, and we'll come back on that.
We Are UU is a community radio station. It doesn't just mean that we invite the community to create programming. And it doesn't just mean that we are a voice for the community. It also means that we are counting on the community to keep us going. And you are the community. Almost all of our modest budget comes from small annual or monthly donations from listeners like you. You get to enjoy our community-focused programming because many others have stepped forward to do their part. Now do your part by joining our community of listener donors. Go to wruu.org right now and make a one-time or monthly donation. And thank you for supporting Savannah's community radio station, 107.5 FM.
This is a message from the Georgia State Department of Public Health. There is a State of Georgia hotline people can call with questions or if they think they may have been exposed to the COVID-19 virus. It is 1-844-442-2681. If you believe you're experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 or have been exposed to the novel coronavirus, please contact your primary care doctor, an urgent care clinic, or your local federally qualified healthcare center. Please do not show up at an emergency room or healthcare facility unannounced. More information can be found at dph.georgia.gov.
All right, everybody. You are listening to The Adam Messer Show. I'm your host, Adam Messer, and my special guest today is author Stuart Jaffe. So thank you very much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And Stuart, right before the break, we were just talking about, and I love the point that you brought up about with authors, when you are guiding the reader through the story and they can see that, they trust you more and they are more confident in your abilities. And when we were off air, I was talking with you, and I feel like it's the same kind of thing with folks that might have a good story idea, or they might have a good premise, which, got the person involved in enough to start reading the book. But if they're inexperienced, they're not guiding the ship the right way.
Right.
They might take a detour when you just want to go to you want to go to the beach. You don't want to take the detour to the sandy knolls and the swampland.
Right, absolutely, and again, this is a lot of this is not consciously done by the reader. It's all these clues that are from having, most people have read. Well, from the beginning, from the time from before you're born, you're being told stories.
Right.
Everybody knows how to digest a story, and so there's a lot of unconscious, subconscious things that are clues to readers of whether they are in the hands of somebody who knows what they're doing or they're not, and it right away. It's like you turn on a new TV show and you pretty quickly will know whether these people are making something that's great, just okay, or not worth your time.
Oh yeah. I feel the same way because there's a lot of stuff out there, a lot of books, a lot of movies, a lot of TV shows, things like that. And I felt I don't want to invest the time in a series if it's going to not deliver. Right. I'm really funny about, the stuff that I watch, especially TV shows and movies and things like that. And with reading too. I mean, I'll be honest with you, there's a lot of stuff, and and I don't want to down anybody. All right. I'm not trying to put anybody down because everybody's new. Everybody starts off at some place, but there's a lot of stuff out there that should have, had another go through or, editing or whatever. And, and I'm not cause I've seen some really cool indie stuff where maybe the special effects or maybe the, settings, not like studio level quality, right? But it was good. The story was good. The acting was decent, and I enjoyed it because I knew it was indie, and I liked it because I'm like, well, you know what? It doesn't have to be super polished to be good.
Right.
But it's good enough to keep my interest, and I find, that value out of that story, right? Because it goes back to the storytelling. It's like, okay, well, I can watch this because I'm getting involved in the story, right? With your, you've been doing this for a long time, and with what we've been talking about, like writing and publishing, being a career author yourself, how do you keep engaging that, because from book to book, or like, with Max Porter, you said, I think there's like 13 or 14 books or something like that.
Right. There's 14. Yeah.
So
How does it not become dull?
well, how do you keep engaging the reader? Because I mean, like,
Right.
That's a challenge. I feel like it's like, how do you keep saying, hey, this is a new aspect of, the character or the scene or the, the next, mystery or whatever.
I mean, well, there's a couple things. First, how I think part of it is that I have to be engaged, right?
Right.
You can always tell if somebody's phoning it in, whether it's acting or music or writing or whatever art form it is. If the artist is truly committed and deeply engaged in what they're doing, I was just a moment ago talking about these subconscious things, clues and all that, but you know it. You can hear it. I can't explain it because it's not something we're conscious of. But I could pull out 2 pieces of music, live performances of some people, and so
it's kind of like if somebody's going through the motions and just, or if somebody's actually trying to.
Yeah. I'm just, so one of my side things that I do is I've been playing guitar for 30 some years.
Oh, nice.
And I taught myself to play. I love blues music. I taught myself to play blues, and that's what I've just done it as a hobby. And then I'm in a local blues band, and we play. Well, we'll hopefully get back to playing in live gigs soon. And it's just something I do for fun. But I've always been into music, and if you bring up one of the great blues guitarists, Stevie Ray Vaughan, or B.B. King, or you name whoever you want, and you listen to them play live, it doesn't matter. It's like within like a couple notes, you can just feel the authenticity, the depth of emotion, their drive, all of it coming through. And you hear somebody who could play the exact same notes, but is just like playing them because they're written on the page to play them, and has no connection to it. You can feel that too, and that's true in all art. So all that is to say that when the first ingredient to me being able to write another book and another book is there's got to be something that I'm excited about writing about it.
Yeah,
and that's part of why I have right now I've got 3 ongoing series. They got Max Porter, Nathan Kay, and the Parallel Society, which is the one about the girl with her grandma who's got superpowers, and
cool.
And those. So I wrote a Max Porter earlier this year. Right now I'm writing a Parallel Society. When I'm done with that, I'll probably write a Nathan Kay. So I'm always rotating just to have something different to write about, a different feeling, a different emotion, a different genre, subgenre. And that's one way. And then when I'm actually coming up with the specific individual book, there has to be something that challenges me. Now that challenge, in the early days, the beginning was, can I write, is book 1 going to be any good? Does anybody want to read book 2?
Yeah.
And then the first time I ever had to write a book 2, it was, can I do that? Or a book 3? Can I even accomplish that? Now with something like the Max Porter series, I know I can write 14 of them. So there is always the chance, okay, can I do it again for a 15th book? That's always a question. But it's finding new things that make it, personal and challenging and interesting. So
that makes me feel really good too, because I am still new to writing and I am still new to publishing. And I've taken, a professional approach with my business and, those kind of things. And, so I'm always looking at challenging myself to do better, to make the next product, the next best product is like, the next book. And I want it to be an improvement over the last book. Right.
Right.
And so as an author, as a writer, I kind of put on my editor hat sometimes. I'm like, hey, buddy, go ahead and get this, done. And, and as an author, as a writer, I have a couple of different series that I've been working on. And, the reason why I'm writing book 3 now for the Blood Thresher series, because like I said, I wrote the first one, had moderate reception and, I felt pretty decent about it. The second one was flat. I started Valhalla Books as a way to be like, okay, well, I'm not going to go this route again. I'm not going to mess up like that. And then doing book 3 was a way to finish this trilogy, right? So I've been writing that. In between writing the second book and me working on this book, I've had a couple of different series that I started working with, or started writing or whatever. And I have not, like, I know it sounds crazy, but like you have a couple of signature series, like when I was talking about this signature chef dish or whatever, you have a couple of signature series that you have different readers that they look for that. And they're like, hey, okay, I can't wait till this next, Nathan K or Max Porter comes out or whatever. That, when you were saying that, it made me feel really good, because I'm like, okay, well, it's okay for me as long as I'm putting in the work and finishing it, completing the projects, right? Not just be like, oh, I'm just going to write just to write.
Right.
It's okay to have these different series.
It's definitely, you can do it, but it is something, we haven't talked about this, which is one of the first things you need to do from a business standpoint as a writer, is figure out what your goal is.
Right.
And because part of my goal was not so much worried about money as much as making sure that I could have some artistic freedom to just to do these different series. And I recognized that I'm cutting into my income, because recognize, if all 40 some books I wrote were all Max Porter, I would be rolling in a lot more money. I'd be making twice as much as I'm making. I mean, I'd be making 6 figures, and I'd be doing great, but it would be a job,
Right.
I would not be enjoying writing Max Porter. That's not to say it won't last 40 books, but if I had to I finished a Max Porter book, now I'm going to go write another Max Porter book, now I'm going to write another Max Porter book, it would just become grinding them out, and I think I would have started to hate it. Other people, they don't, there are people who are writing books, and they're like, I don't care. As long as I found something that's making me money, that's what I'm going to do. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's absolutely fine. And so you should know, though, I knew by doing multiple series that my income would be less, because there's always going to be, I've got people who are Max Porter fans, and that's it. So they get
right. They don't read any of your other stuff. Yeah,
they're not going to read other stuff. My ideal readers, I love all my readers, but my ideal ones are the ones who will go with me wherever I go.
Yeah, and that's something I saw early on too, was that people are like, well, you can't switch genres, you can't do this. And I, as an author, I like to write sci-fi, I like horror, I like mystery stuff, but it's kind of like when you do multiple things, people are like, well, I don't really understand what you're doing. Like when I was doing the Savannah Quill stuff before I changed it over to Valhalla Books Publishing, when I was doing Savannah Quill stuff, I was doing mainly, since 2016, I was doing author events. I hosted a couple of different conventions for authors. I started this thing called Books and Brew Savannah, where it was a charitable fundraiser for the Ronald McDonald House. And so when I started publishing books, it was like just me being an indie author. I didn't have it under the Savannah Quill Publishing House. That's, I wasn't really using that name, but I kind of was. And people were like, well, what is that? What is that? What is that? And it was confusing for them. So one of the reasons why I streamlined doing like it changed from, like, when I originally did the radio show, it was called Muses, Memoirs, and More. I changed it to the Adam Messer Show to simplify it, because I had people that were like, oh, well, I like this thing that you're doing, but I don't really care about what you're doing on this other side, or I like these kind of books, but I don't really care, like, if you're doing this other stuff. It doesn't matter,
And there's always going to be that.
Yeah.
It's never going to change. But there are people who, if you do your job really well, at least in writing, I've had a lot of people who are basically, they get impatient waiting for the next Max Porter book. And I'll say, well, why don't you try this? Just give it a try, and they'll try it. And then they're like, oh, now I'm a Nathan K fan as well. I literally just this morning got somebody asking for some signed books. She was like, that was her situation. She's like, I guess now I like Nathan Kay a lot too. And
That's a good
you
point.
know,
I got to do the station ID real quick.
yeah.
Everybody, thank you for tuning in today. You're listening to the Adam Messer Show. I'm your host, Adam Messer, with my special guest, Stuart Jaffe, and this is WRUU LP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings Community Radio with Global Soul. So, yeah, I think that's really cool. So you had somebody message you and say, hey, I'd like to get signed copies of Nathan Kay?
Yeah, sure. She wanted to buy some signed copies, so
Nice.
I'm happy to do it. But she was she's been a big fan of Max Porter for a long time, and I know who she was, and she was basically, I don't know why, but she eventually decided to finally try this Nathan Kay stuff and got into it. And you know, I mean, it's a little bit easier once you have some you know, history. I have all these other books, so there's something that you know, we were talking earlier about all the subconscious little things that will make a reader trust a writer, and I have an advantage over you or over you know, beginning writers in that even authors who or readers who've never heard of me before, they go to my, you know, they go to my any one of my book pages on Amazon, and they'll see, oh, he's got a slew of books out.
Yeah, you got a great back catalog.
And so that automatically gives me
credibility.
You know, credibility to get that. So there are things there are techniques I can use in the beginning of a book that beginning writers can't get away with unless they are phenomenal, you know, writers. But if they're just like, you know, an average, like the rest of us, beginning writer, when they're starting out, they can't get away with certain things because there's no trust. But you know, especially my Max Porter, if I'm Max Porter 15, if I want to start off that book in a very slow, unconventional way, I can do that because my readers are like, I've read 14 of these. They're always end good. You know, I'll trust wherever this goes. I can use that trust. That's another tool I have that established authors have, that unestablished authors have to earn over time.
Oh yeah, that's with any industry. I mean, that definitely is.
Yeah.
You know, you can tell the difference between someone who's professional, and you know, and that's not to knock anybody that's brand new to the profession, and it really is not. It's not even a put down or anything like that.
No, we all were there. Hey, when I put out my first book, I couldn't get away with the things I can get away with now.
I know,
because nobody would trust me, but now my readers trust me.
Well, I know several. I don't want to. You know, I don't want to sound funny or anything like that, but I know several people who are indie authors that got into it in the last couple of years, right? And they have just knocked it out of the park because they do, you know, rapid release, and you know, they put out a ton of, you know, books and whatever, and they do a lot of marketing, and they do a lot of Facebook advertising, and you know, those kind of things. And it's not that they're. I think it's kind of crazy because going back to the widget thing, right? Going back to the marketing and the widget thing, and you're talking about. You know, like a market advantage or whatever, because you have, you know, credibility and you have, you know, longevity and things like that. And I think what I've seen with some of those folks is when they rapid release, you know, people look for that, you know, that catalog. They're like, oh, well, you know, some of they call it a whale reader or whatever, right? And if they like one of your books, they want to go and read all of your stuff, right?
Sure.
And so I've seen some folks shortcutting that, you know, by rapid releasing, putting out books. I've even seen, and it's not for me, and I'm not knocking anybody, but I've seen people where they'll hire ghostwriters, and you know, they'll put out like a bunch of books that are written not by them at all. You know, they might have had a concept and said, oh, it's kind of like commissioning an art piece.
Nothing
right?
new.
Yeah, right.
It's the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew. You know, those are not written by one person. There's no Frank Dixon. It's like
a studio book. You know,
it's just exactly what it is. They just hire them out.
Yeah, and I get that, and you know, I've seen that. But the average Joe, you know, or Jill or whatever, like myself, it's me. I'm a one-person show. You know, I'm not. You know, I don't have the funds to hire, you know, a lot of different people. And I know, I mean, like the industry costs, it's expensive to get a book off the ground if you're not doing the work yourself. And then there's a trade-off, you know, like if I did if I were to try to paint a cover of a book for myself, you know, it's not going to be as nice as, you know, if I hired a painter, right? So I feel like it's a trade-off. And then, you know, but I also see where when you are taking those steps, and you're doing the work, you know, you're making progress. I mean, it's not going to guarantee somebody's going to make, you know, independent living off of writing. There's nobody's ever promised that, but it just makes it, you know, one step closer to like, hey, you know, can I buy a coffee today? You know, like you said, trying to sell one book every other day.
Oh yeah,
you know?
Oh yeah. On the buy a coffee thing, that in that same vein, the early days, it was, you know, oh, can I take my wife out to dinner or to a movie?
Right.
You know? And then it was like, hey, I could pay a bill, and then it was, hey, I could pay my mortgage, and then it's, hey, I'm putting food on the table, and you know, everything is coming from the writing, and that kind of thing.
I would love to be independently, financially independent from my writing, and that's one of my goals. I mean, like I'd love to get there. You know,
I mean, I say that, but I should caveat it that very few of us actually make all of their money just from sales of ebooks or one thing. Most authors have to pull in multiple strains of revenue.
Oh yeah.
So there's ebooks, there's print books, there's audiobooks, there's, if you're fortunate enough, you know, you can make money through options, film and TV stuff, and appearances and things
I'll tell
like
you,
that. And
most of the folks that I've ever met that say that they're full-time authors, they're not actually making money. They're being subsidized by somebody. Somebody's paying the bills.
Is always good for that.
right. They're full-time authors, but you know, they're not paying the bills. Like, you know, it's a big difference between like what you're talking about. Like you're making an income and you're living off of that income. You know?
I do, but I also, you know, I've been doing it long enough that I have investment income. I have, you know, I have other forms, so that it all together makes a living. But I do, I mean, I do. If I needed to live just off of the writing, I could do that if I had to. I mean, it would be a tight living, but we could do it.
Yeah. But I'm just saying, like, you know, it's one of those things where there's a difference between like being a full-time author who's financially independent and, you know, getting into it and somebody, I don't know. I think it's just kind of a nuance in my opinion, because I've seen some people that are like, oh, you know, I'm a full-time author. Yes, you are, but you're not, you know, you're not independently wealthy from it or independently financing yourself. You know, it's like, so, and that my goal is to be like, okay, well, I'd like to have a nice financially independence from writing. It would be really cool. So, but you know, one step at a time, right?
Yeah, and it's one book at a time, one fan at a time. It just
one word at a time.
It takes little steps, and you know, suddenly, I mean, again, you know, I started out just like everybody else with one book, and you know, 8 years later, there's a lot more. But
that's amazing. So, Stuart, where's the best place that people could check out your books?
Well, Amazon is, of course, the easiest, and you just plug my name in, and everything will pop up. If you like audiobooks, I'm on Audible and Apple and Amazon, and or go to my website, which is just stuartjaffe.com, and you can get links to everything.
And that's STUART.
I am everywhere. If you've got Kobo or Barnes and Noble or whatever way you like to read books, I'm available there.
Nice. And Jaffe is spelled Jaffe, right?
Correct, yeah.
So stuartjaffe.com. Man, I've really had a great time talking with you the last 2 hours. I can't believe it's already been 2 hours. It's crazy.
I know. We got so much more I mean, there's so much more we could hit.
We're gonna have to.
I've been having a blast.
I'm gonna have to have you come back on, man. We'll have to keep this.
I'd love to.
So thank you so much, Stuart, for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate that.